Block. Hey, everybody. Let me see. Let's get this thing going. You know, man, the after class discussion went ham last time, which makes me crazy happy and continues, I think, today. So it's great. I mean, it's great, right? I don't know. I didn't follow the whole thread. I had other crap I had to deal with. Uh, but Um, I love the interaction. You know what I mean? As long as everybody's staying respectful, you know what I mean, and not being dum dums. I love the interaction, the exchange. That's really what it's all about. If everybody can, you know, I think we've reached a, bizarre point in our sort of cultural, social history where literally just holding certain perspectives is viewed as sort of like violent opinion or whatever. And the Overton window, which we've talked about a little bit, shrinks. And, uh, you know what I mean? And then it's very easy to vilify everybody and then not have honest exchange of ideas. So as long as we're having honest exchange of ideas, and I haven't been through the thread to kind of look at it and see if there's anybody I want to call out, for being for whatever, for being a jerk or an a-hole or an incorrigible or something like that. But I hope it's been good. That's really what we're trying to exercise here. And as I've said a bunch of times, that to me is really the gist of like truly ethical behavior. Starts with a level of respect, for human dignity, for another person who gets to disagree on certain things, on a lot of things, actually, it turns out. You know, So that's my take on sort of, fundamental ethics. But hey, we're talking about open source today. And so yeah, I may, when I have a minute, I've really been slammed with some stuff, but I may go back and review the thread. Um, so again, I really hope it's been good. Um, let's see. We are trying still to wrap up, get all the stuff posted, make sure all the assignments are kind of in the right spot. I get those done. I'll send up a flare. Again, there's just some stuff going on that it's been like high non-maskable interrupt, you know what I mean, on me, which has been really unfortunate. Has kept me away in dumb ways. So I apologize. But hey, I'm functional. I'm up walking, man. Okay, so open source. Are we ready? Is there any other housekeeping stuff? I understand that some of the stuff is like not opening up, or I still got to get back to Canvas with Tim and Devin and kind of roll through and you know get that uh, get that cooked. Um, but at least we have the schedule, which is such progress, man. It's just so progress. Uh, Let me throw out. So if there's any other housekeeping, please let me know. Like right now, um, this is where we are right here today. I want to just say a couple things about these players, okay? Stallman and Eric Raymond. You can ignore Alex McLean and Charles Knutson. And also the tragedy of the commons I want to talk about a little bit. It wasn't required reading, but it's I think it's a very influential and very important paper, as it relates to open source. Okay. And by the way, pulling up, we got no comments so far. Okay. Um, about when should we have the second book finished? Yeah, so let me just look. I'm going to be flex, but I want to try to do right here, April 20th is kind of what we do on that day is once I know you've got to submit what your book is going to be, and I'll group you into discussion groups based upon the books that you read. So if I get like, five people read the same book, I'll throw you all into a discussion to a reading circle. And in the little side groups that we've got over here, there's a bunch of extra voice channels, right? little workshop channels. We'll throw you in those workshop. I give you assignments. I'll post those so that everybody knows where to go. And then if they're not exactly the same, I'll try to group them, so maybe cybersecurity people that, and people, whatever, try to get people in some kind of cohesion, right? But yeah, April 20th, and your book inspired post on that same day, right there. Oh, I wonder if that's actually like lit up. Let's go look. Not published. Yeah, see, that's my fault. Yeah, we'll get there. Okay, what else? What else? Yeah, when the blog post we've done so far is going to be graded. Is it really true, Jenny? Is that really, really true? Because I thought we had more progress than that. And as you know, I've been incapacitated, heavily medicated, and all the rest of it. And digging out, and my own crap has not actually, I haven't graded the stuff. Was mine. But no, that is absolutely not the intent to be that far behind. No, 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 no. So thank you for the heads up. I really, really appreciate it. And you're like, why don't you know this? Well, I think you know why I don't know this, but that's part of why I'm coming back online and getting just, it's a big dig out. You know what I mean? When you're like medicated for 6 weeks. Remember too, do you remember when the semester started and I was dealing with vertigo? Like that was January was vertigo month. February and March are like back pain and back surgery recovery and nerve pain in the leg months. It's been suck. My year so far has been suck. So anyway, I've been just, it's been horrible. But no, I really do. But Jenny, I do take it seriously. And again, a future date, I'm going to just be so on the ball. I just know it. I just know I will be. Okay. But yeah, really, truly, truly thank you for that heads up. Um, all right. Anybody else? I'm just gonna roll. Okay. We want to talk about open source. Um, okay. Here's the thing that I want to try to help you understand about open source. Okay. Here we go. These were the readings. There's so much reading that would be and could be relevant with respect to open source software. Okay. I don't have a, believe it or not, there's actually a couple topics like intellectual property that I actually have like lecture slides, kind of like I did for writing. But the problem is that I have so many things to say that I just, I kind of like dump the lecture slides and take off running down the dirt road, because just so many topics. There's so freaking much. My curse when it comes to this kind of stuff is that I sort of know too much and I've lived too much of it. You know what I mean? It's like what do you distill out and say that's the critical thing? That's what you really need to know. Oh man. Um, yeah. So John asks, is the syllabus the best way of finding the assignments I'm behind on? I feel like if I don't have due dates, tell me what I have to do. I'm really disorganized. I do get that. I do get that. And relying on UVU's calendar on Canvas. Well, I think that when we get everything cleaned up, we'll attach due dates, but just please understand me, okay? Please, I beg you. I beg you to understand me that I'll attach due dates so they'll show up for you, and all the due dates to this point are kind of flex. So if there's stuff that you like just didn't get to, etc., it'll show it as being overdue or whatever. There's not going to be any late penalties. You know what I mean? There's too much on me, way too much on me. Um, you know, okay. So I'll set those, but please nobody freak out like, oh, Dr. K, suddenly end of March he makes everything overdue, but right, yeah, John, it will at least give you that list that you can work from, and that's totally fair. And in the meantime, just know that you need a blog every week, okay? You gotta be blogging every week. Just know that. And again, I really, really apologize for all of that, and I don't know what I could have done physically different this semester, honestly, other than to try to get on top of the game, catch up before we're done, and then just be really, really forgiving when I'm dealing with you guys, you know? Yeah. So yeah, and it really from a points or penalty perspective, don't worry about deadlines. But do it because it's still going to be due. You still can't afford to get really stacked up way too late. You know what I mean? Okay, so I
Just
want
a
to talk.
quick question more.
Yeah,
Sorry. I think you already said this before. I just want to clarify.
yeah, Jenny.
Is it still possible to resubmit if you got like a 4 out of a 5 and
Absolutely.
to get a 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, that's one of the things that I feel the worst about is that if all the grading is happening, a little more Johnny on the spot, then this apparently is what Johnny, that's the sign language for Johnny on the spot, apparently. Um, then you sort of know, then you could resubmit, then get another grade, and then submit again. You know what I mean? To me, there's no end to the potential to keep making it better, because it's about improvement, not about, did you possess all skill on February 12th? I don't care. I'd like you to all become better writers, and refine that ability to express yourselves and think, you know what I mean, and digest and analyze and all of that. That's really what this is all about. And then throw a lot of topics at you that maybe on your own you wouldn't otherwise have gone after. That's really what we're kind of doing here. Okay, great questions. Great questions. Let's see. Let's see. It's just so sad that we just aren't ever going to have any in-person time. But no, that's not true. Down the stretch, I will do, well, it's not here on this thing, but I'm going to do the individual writing workshops with you, okay, during April. When April kicks in, it's about a week away, I'm going to start meeting with you one-on-one, and I'd prefer to do it as a video chat just for the eye contact, just for the face-to-face, even though it's remote, but there's still a face-to-face component that I think is really valuable, and just being able to kind of, from you all see me, but for most of you, I don't have any idea. It's just harder to connect with the humanity. You know what I mean? But the personal writing workshop will go like 10 or 15 minutes. And I love it. It's a very cool opportunity. And I think that if last semester's a gauge on that, I think the students tended to really get value out of that as well. And it's really just participation as well. There's not like a grade on it, like, oh, you said the wrong words, -5. It's really just you show up, you do it, we have the conversation, boom, you get the points. So, okay. What else? What else? Let's see. Okay. All right. We're talking about open source software. Let me back up with a little history. A little history that I think most of you may have some, peripheral sense of it. I'm going to blow this up more. These are kind of the readings, but the fish doesn't know that it's swimming in water, right? We don't really know that we're walking around in, you know, Earth's atmosphere, predominantly oxygen, but not purely so, or we would have all blown up a long time ago, right? But we got our whole oxygen, nitrogen, blah 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 thing. And I just tapped out on my limit of what I really understand about the composition of our atmosphere. At ground level in Utah. But what I'm trying to say is that whatever you kind of have grown up with. Remember we talked about Douglas Adams last time, right? Well, open source for you. Going out on a limb here. Open source for you is just the way the universe works. Is that a fair statement? And again, I really appreciate if you would, as I'm throwing these questions out, humor me and bless your classmates by just jumping in, whether it's vocal, verbal, audio, or just things in there. Um, does it feel that way to you that open source software as an idea is just kind of the way the universe works? That's just the nature of the order of things. Not that everything's open source, but that there is this thing called open source. There are just these projects. for most of you, there's always been a Linux. There's always been, yeah, Matthew, can I define? Oh, Chad, open source does not explain the purpose of life. It does constitute the purpose of some people's lives. Take Richard Stallman for an example. Could I define open source software, Matthew? Well, I could take you to this paper right here, Open Source from Mythos to Meaning, in which Alex and I actually, yeah, Camille, there are different types. Alex and I just tried to basically, just demystify the whole thing. You know what I mean? Break it down a little bit. Let me just see real quick if I can, because I do think it's actually a very good starting point. I shall find it. Let me see. Yeah, okay, here we go. So this was a paper that Alex and I did. He was one of my grad students at BYU. And so this is that paper, okay? And I'll try to blow that up a little bit. Right? Because there you go. And I don't know, Matthew, if you were like trolling me there, because it's really the start of this paper. Yeah, and so what is open source? And we basically pulled out a few. So there was Linus, right? Linus. Um, Linus says, I just don't care about proprietary software. It's not evil or immoral. It just doesn't matter. I think open source can do better. It's a superior way of working together and generating code. A lot more fun because it makes cooperation easier, you know. And I think that he's very much correct in many, many ways, right? Then we've got Stallman, and Stallman is sort of, how can I describe Stallman? Stallman is kind of like the crazy prophet. You know what I mean? He's like the radical. Stallman is very much, I think, philosophically going all the way back to the dawn of the GNU project, right? Which was Stallman's thing with a recursive acronym, because GNU stands for GNU's not Unix. So the G in GNU stands for GNU. So Stallman is very excited about this recursive acronym that he used to coin his project. So Stallman, well, Linus, sorry, I have to, my lips hurt real bad. Linus just wanted to make his own Unix, starting with Minix, which was an operating system that had been created by Andrew Tannenbaum. And I had a senior operating systems course when I was an undergrad wrapping up at BYU with this operating system called Minix. All the source code to the operating system was in the book, which is down the hall and in my library. And we went through all the source code for the entire OS back then. And then what Tannenbaum did was I don't remember exactly how we got them, but all of the Minix operating system came on like 8 or 10, 5.25-inch floppy disks. 5.25, my friends. That's these. Isn't it? And you have to go clunk. And anyway, and so I played with it. I actually modified it and did dorking around with Minix. Linus started with that. That was actually a starting point. He didn't just start from scratch. He started with Tannenbaum's Minix, and then as a joke, he called it Linux because of Linus. You know, it's like, that's my little thing. I'm calling it Linux. And then and it sounds very much like Linus, and then it just kind of stuck. In an interview I saw with him, he's just like, it was just a joke, kind of a working title. He's like, yeah, I can't call it Linux. That's just too egotistical, and sometimes it sticks. Anyway, and Stallman was doing this GNU project, which was basically similarly oriented, motivated, because Stallman wanted to also replace Unix. Okay, remember Unix came out of Bell Labs, right? And then there became, that there was some issues with that code base being forked, and eventually you get that BSD Unix and AT&T Unix, and then SCO becomes the acquirer, I believe, of the AT&T Unix. Sort of Santa Cruz operation, which then then they were acquired by Novell, then spun back off, and then as Caldera, and then rebranded back to SCO, and then started suing the world for that's an episode. Holy crap! Um, by the way, how many of you even know that have ever? I don't have we don't have time to go there today, but that whole story of SCO suing the world because of the assertion that IBM had, that parts of their stuff had wound up in IBM's code base without proper attribution or whatever. But my impression was that they got a little crazy. They started suing customers, suing licensees of IBM stuff. And I was actually approached by attorneys from DC to be a testifying expert for SCO. What do you think I did? What do you think I did? Okay, everybody's talking about compiler, and this is awesome. Not everybody, only a few. What do you think I did? Any guesses? What would you do? What would you do? What do you do? Do you take the money, or what do you do? Yeah, I'm just going to open it up because I think we got to get everybody off the compiler. Get everybody off the compiler issue. Again, not everybody, just like, I don't know, a few. What are you going to do? So SCO was that was kind of, they were suing the world, and the part that bothered me the most was that they were suing IBM's customers. To me, I don't know. Maybe there's legal rationale for that. I don't know. But it always just seemed to me that IBM would just constantly say to SCO, "Okay, we understand your assertion. Why don't you tell us exactly, you know, what it is that you believe was taken from where?" Right? At some point, the onus is on the plaintiff to prove their case. The defendant doesn't have to prove innocence. You know, um, it's incumbent upon the plaintiff to make their case, right? Um, Hang on a second. And it always seemed to me, as I followed the case back then when it was live, it was the early 2000s, the early digits. And it always seemed to me like every time IBM would be like, "Okay, look, you got it." And I've been actually an expert witness on certain cases um, where somebody's making an accusation, like you've stolen our trade secrets. Okay, what are they? And then they like just drop a cherry bomb in the hen house, and then everybody runs around. Like, and we come back to, okay, what are they? You do have to actually say what they are. You just can't keep it open ended and somehow, I don't know, somehow persuade the court that it's our job to prove innocence or something. That's not how this thing works. Anyway, yeah, anybody? So Chad says, tough question. Yeah, and I think, right, Ian, I think that's right. I think a lot of time, the customers probably, you can imagine an environment which a customer would know what's going on, but readily imagine an environment in which a customer would not know what's going on. And then it's like, what is that doing? What is that really doing? Um, okay, but anyway, so yeah, I was approached, talked to the attorney. They wanted to retain me, and I actually sent them a little note. I was a lot younger. Today, I would have just said, unfortunately, I'm conflicted. And I would have just simply stepped away. at the time I felt like I needed to say something. And so I actually did. It's got to be around '03. And I just sent an email basically just saying, I just want you to know that I feel like what SCO is doing is unethical and immoral. And there's no way I can, in good conscience, sully my reputation by being associated with them. Basically, it's what I said, and lobbed that email over the wall to the attorneys. And weirdly, they never responded to my email. But I just felt like I walked away. I walked away rather than, you know what I mean? But that was a situation where I'd followed it enough. I had enough of a sense of the industry, what was hurting or helping the industry, society, culture, the technology, some of these issues relating to copyright law, trade secrets and things like that. And I just couldn't. I just couldn't. And so I walked away from tens of thousands of bucks, probably. Although I think that when everything's settled, I think that SCO might have actually stiffed all of their attorneys and experts, and then like declared bankruptcy and didn't pay anybody. So I probably wouldn't have gotten paid anyway. Dance with the devil, baby. Yeah, SCO is SCO, Ammon. Santa Cruz Operation. That's what it actually stood for. They were suing everybody because they asserted that IBM software had SCO, and SCO, by the way, by then was like open source stuff. So yeah, exactly, but without permission and without the thing that comes over. So there's a licensing issue. Let me back up. So let's go back to me and Alex, Linus and Richard Stallman. Stallman was trying to do a Unix knockoff. He had built all of the little the utilities, grep, the shell, sed, grep, awk, all the little utilities that you get with Unix. He had rebuilt all of those. Right now, it's an interesting thing from a software engineering perspective because spec's not that hard. You just literally just have this act exactly like that. It's really, since you don't have access to the source code, it's very much like a clean room effort, right? Match the interface and don't worry about the rest of it. I mean, build it from scratch. And then Linus began to get to the part where he was working on the kernel, the core of the operating system. And he was doing this multi-threaded, fancy pants thing. And apparently it was really difficult, incredibly tough to debug, etc. And around this time, he learned about Linus's Linux kernel. And of course, because everything they were doing, what Linus was doing was starting with replacing the Unix kernel, but leaving all the utilities. And what Stallman was doing was exactly the opposite. Start with all the utilities and then eventually replace the kernel. So eventually they were able to take Linux, drop it in with the GNU project utilities, and basically just let it be part of the GNU distribution. And then Stallman always wanted to call it like GNU Linux, or like co-brand. He was very worried about the branding, whatever. And I don't know that, I think people still know about GNU, but the biggest I think real revelation for the GNU project was the GPL, which was the GNU public license. Right now, Stallman. I mean, you guys, if you've never seen the man, this guy he's just a really strange dude. He's a seriously, Linus, pretty normal looking, functioning guy. Richard Stallman, I don't think anybody would say that about him. And actually Eric Raymond either, frankly. I think those are both kind of like hyper nerds. Linus, a little more. Anyway, but Stallman, he called this thing copyleft. So see, it's like copyright, only it's like backwards, like just like GNU, isn't it? It's a recursive C. The G stands for GNU. G stands for the acronym of which it's a part. Whoa! Thank you, Richard. Anyway, I have a real love-hate relationship with Stallman. His place in history in computer science is anchored solid, because he really was kind of like that early prophet of open source. He referred to it as free software. Software wants to be free, and then he would emphasize this is free as in freedom, and not as in free beer. That was Stallman's thing. It's more like freedom as in free will, and not freedom as in free beer. Or you could also say it's, maybe there's an element of it that's like free puppy. I think that's, from a software engineering perspective, I think that's pretty apt, actually. Free as in free puppy. Like, okay, you didn't pay anything for it, but you got to maintain it to make any real use out of it. There's still something coming. Anyway, what did Stallman say? Yeah, we'd like to think that our society encourages helping your neighbor, but each time we reward, it's hard to say, we reward someone for obstructionism, which he would define as not sharing code, or admire them for the wealth they've gained in this way, we're sending the opposite message. So Stallman was very much, he would also encourage everybody. Speaking of security, Stallman would encourage everybody to have their password just be the enter key on their systems. Again, just that it's really it's a philosophically puristic take on kind of like everything. And the thing about that is, I told you about my father-in-law, right? Who would always put his keys in the car, leave it unlocked, and have the keys like right there. And you're always just like, please, somebody, please steal that car. You'd be like with Stallman, you'd be like, you gotta know that somehow he's gonna piss somebody off, and they're just gonna log into his world and blow everything away. Like, I don't know what stops that. You know what I mean? And back to Cliff Stall, right? And should we thank the people who alerted us that we probably had to better lock our doors and put bars on the windows? Oh dear, a fade. Could you see the fade? You see the fade? But anyway, Linus and Stallman become very significant figures going back a solid, 25 years? Probably, yeah. Yeah, ish, maybe more. Yeah, so Camille, it's very trusting, right? But is that okay? I guess, I mean, everybody gets to do their thing, but you know, would you do that? Would you do that? Hey, everybody, by the way, my UVU password to log in is just the enter key. Would you do it? I mean, is it a naive view that sort of ignores what the world really is, what the world actually has to offer as a wake-up call, if that's your approach? Or is it in fact puristic, sort of independent of what anybody does? In the face of bad actors, is that still a great play? Anyway, okay, then comes Eric Raymond, who talked about the business advantages, among other things. And that's the cathedral and the bazaar. Open source is the process of systematically harnessing open development and decentralized peer review to lower costs and improve software quality. Raymond, there was a thing coined and referred to as Raymond's Law, or is it Linus's Law? Which law? The idea was that when there are many eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, right? It's that massive eyes on something, massive number of eyes on something. It's just easier to find. Is that Linus? Man, I'm blanking. It's either Raymond's Law or Linus's Law. Maybe somebody could double check that for me. Let me see. I got John. Um, let's see. Let's see. Which John? John, the Piper's son. Uh, okay, we're dry. Okay, let me see. Okay, I'm not gonna go into the hate speech conversation until next week. Yeah. Yeah, not to bring up an old conversation. Nice play, John. John 1, John 2, whichever John you are. Uh, let me see. Camille said, I think it's irresponsible to encourage others to not use a secure password. I tend to agree. Maybe I would if my computer didn't store my whole world, right? Like, if in your car was everything and you didn't have this perfect confidence that everybody would just walk on by and leave all your really valuable crap alone, I probably would, I'd be worried about it. Yeah. Now here's an interesting thing. Ian said it would never happen because those who have made billions off of software would not have done so if everything was open source. Okay, now this is an interesting thing. And I would just assert, Ian, without going like all the way deep on this, but kind of maybe just sprinkle some little bookmarks. The two are not mutually exclusive. Okay. There are very, very wealthy people, okay, who have grown, their little world. I'm just looking real quick. Let me do O'Reilly. What's O'Reilly? What's his first name? Come on, O'Reilly. I'll just go open source. Who's the guy? Um, who's my guy? Tim. It was Tim O'Reilly. Yeah. So if I go, um, yeah, Tim O'Reilly Network. I'm just curious. Okay, 100 million bucks. Piker. Nobody. Let's go. Let's go. Just out of curiosity, Richard Stallman. Not that Stallman cares about this at all. We don't even have one of these. Let's go, Linus. 100 million bucks. Maybe that's just a generic answer that everybody says. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that what Stallman said was it's free software as in freedom, not as in free beer. So it's not like, you can make a business model around it. Who's the other one? Larry Augustine. Let me see something. Larry Augustine started a company. And my point is not that this is the goal of everything, right? You know what I'm saying? My goal is not. Okay, here we go. Let's look at Larry Augustine. So he's a billionaire. Okay, here we go. Biggies who earned huge money from the open source. Augustine built Sugar CRM, but before that, Augustine had sorry for the VA Research, VA Linux. Yeah, it was VA Linux. It was one of the first early distributors of Linux. So Augustine did everything he's done career-wise in the open source space, and is a billionaire. Okay. And then I've got apparently super slow. So there's Augustine. I met him one time. I don't know these guys, and what their sort of story is. Yeah, I really don't know. Three biggies, only three. There are more. Okay, so my point just being, all I'm really doing there again, I'm not advocating for like, oh, Dr. Kai thinks that being a billionaire is everything. It's not what I'm saying. I am simply saying that yeah, no, not auto parts, John. That just to Ian's point, just to clarify that that they wouldn't have made billions if it weren't for open source, and I think that's not true. that the two are not, it's not like open source, not money, or open source, no capitalism, you know what I mean? And proprietary equals capitalism. That's a false dichotomy, in my humble opinion. Yeah. Okay. Let me hit back to a couple of things. Okay. Bob Young. What was Bob Young's? Man, blanking on Bob Young's company. Open source gives customers control over the technologies they use. Red Hat? Who was Bob Young? Talk to me. You guys are moving real slow, by the way, today. I just want to say it. I'm moving so much faster than you. Bob Young. Bob Young. Red Hat. Yeah, he's the founder of Red Hat. And let me see. Oh, let's go $3.8 billion for Bob Young, founder of Red Hat. And what does Red Hat do? Linux distribution, plus a bunch of other dev, plus a other bunch of services and things like that. So everybody, Stallman was the only guy, you know, again, he's just really just a very interesting character. But everybody else, kind of understood you can make a business out of this. You can still, because look, businesses make money because they provide service and value to a customer base that chooses to, partake of their services. That's just the bottom line. That's the fundamental contractual exchange of capitalism, right? And monopolies are situations in which there is no competition. The competition has gone away. Okay. And ironically, and this is bookmark this for a future point, in my sort of quasi radically independent, fairly libertarian view of a lot of things, the ultimate monopoly is government when it comes to services that government provides, and you don't have any other choice. That is the ultimate monopoly. So those that are like, I don't trust capitalism, I trust the government, you're saying, well, Amazon's so powerful, they're an effective monopoly, I'll trust the government, which is an absolute monopoly, unless there's some competition. And in my view, competition forces the market to be responsive, drives prices down, drives service up, drives wages up. It does a lot of things. It's only monopolistic things where where the market is actually constrained. And I'm not a pure laissez-faire, economic believer, right? There are obviously limits and constraints. The question is, where do you draw those lines is the burning question. Okay. All right. So what I'm trying to say, that was all inspired. Thank you, Ian, for inspiring that little rant. And let me see. Okay. So then Camille said, I'm kind of catching up a little bit. Camille said, it's why I don't bother locking my car. If people want to steal my car, they will. But my life's easier if my door is unlocked. So I just make sure there's little to nothing, in it. And by the way, there's a certain value to that, right, Camille? Because if you lock your car, now it depends on where the car is. Okay, if your car is in the parking lot at the mall, I would tend to lock, because you're not going to have a lot of violent noise making, break the windows, sitting in the parking lot at the mall, when you can more readily just kind of, if you want to be a thief, try door handle, go to the next one, try door handle, right? You don't have to be perfectly secure. You just have to be more secure than the next guy, than the next opportunity. You have to be more secure than that, so that the water kind of flows downhill. You're up here, other opportunities are easier pickings. And that's mostly it. It's, at the parking lot at the mall, you're just kind of running around checking for, at least this is how I did it, checking for whether doors are unlocked, And the other thing you're trying to do with security is take the barrier to entry higher than the value of what you're going to get from it and the risk if something bad happens. So I'd say, like I said, but if you're like on the street, you know, and you're just parked on your street, then the door's locked. Now you're looking at, if somebody thinks you've got something valuable, broken windows and all that kind of crap. Anyway. So side notes. Anyway, Yeah, so Alex said a lot of modern softwares for services which need infrastructure in order to function. Those servers/databases take money to build. Apps going open source could work, but anything that's part of a large infrastructure needs to pay its operating costs even if they weren't trying to make a profit. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, Alex. Although what's interesting about that is the companies, a lot of companies, uh, like mainframe companies or, companies like IBM, who was the ancient, big mainframe company, kind of the winner that came out of there was a bunch of companies, that were doing big iron and mainframes and stuff like that. IBM kind of came out of that as they sometimes referred to as the king of the seven dwarfs. But um, anyway, uh, if I've got my history on that right, I've got a book I can recommend to you if anybody's interested with that about that ancient history. But no, I'm just saying that companies realized some time back that if they could collaborate on infrastructure, they could compete on application. Does that make sense? Like you might have you might have different browsers. That's why there's still browser wars, right? Because in a browser, maybe you've got, I don't even know what the browser popularities are at this point in the game. You know, somebody got it. It's obviously got to be Chrome. What's up there? Chrome, then Internet Explorer, Safari, Opera. No, I don't know. What's the top? Somebody got it? What's the top browsers? I'm pulling it up. I'm looking. Chrome, Safari. Okay, that's funky. Usage share of web browsers. Yeah, according to the Wikipedia. Okay, can I ask the dumb question of the day? Are you ready for my dumbest question of the day so far? What is Edge? Does anybody use it? So this is the market share. Let me throw this over here for you. This is what I'm showing as the market share. Okay, hang on. That's mobile. Tablet browsers, mobile browsers, desktop browsers. Chrome, 67%. Not a shocker. 2/3, right? Um, Hang on a second. Shoot. There we go. Yeah, okay. And I've got my confession is that I don't know. Maybe I don't know anything about Edge. I'm not sure. Then comes Firefox at 8%. This is different measurements. I don't know why this order is not stacked like that, but um, do it that way. Chrome first, Safari second, then Edge. Cross-platform web browser developed by Microsoft. First release for Windows 10 and Xbox One, then Droid and iOS. Anybody use Edge? Okay, sorry, and I gotta jump down. Aaron, you use Netscape. Yeah, doof. So wait, so John, DuckDuckGo has their own browser, not just like a search engine. I obviously am underexposed to DuckDuckGo, right? And by the way, and I'm talking about primarily desktop at this point, okay? I think that phone is just a different thing. Aaron used Edge for about 2 years. Oh, Edge's internet. Is that right, Camille? Oh, John said the same thing. Other John, third John. Edge's Internet Explorer 2. Edge's Internet Explorer rebranded. So it probably like comes native on Windows 10, and that's why it has the market share. And then and then the other, 67 or whatever percent jump out and just go get Chrome real quick. Download that for Windows 10. Okay, so okay. That's why I don't know it. I don't use Windows. Not out of any religious zeal per se. I need a Windows machine, actually. Firefox, Opera, Internet Explorer still plugging along at 2%. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then here's, I don't know what these, anything about the credibility of these sources, over, stack counter versus net market share. I don't know. Okay. Interesting. All right. Where am I going with all this? You may be asking yourself. I'm going back here. Bob Young, multi-billionaire, founder of Red Hat. Yeah, gives customers control over the technology instead of enabling the vendors to control their customers through restricting access to the code behind the technologies. All right. And then we had to cite Inigo Montoya, relative to open source software. And it really gets back to the whoever asked the first question about this. What do we mean by open source? Okay, and so our kind of philosophy. So we did research during that time for, I don't know, at least a half a decade. We were doing research in open source software. We were driven by a desire to study software engineering. Essentially to take source code repositories and study and analyze those repositories in order to understand what's going on from a development perspective. Can we look at the archaeological dig and discern something about the software? That's what drove us. And as a byproduct, we kind of gained a lot of fluency in the history and the dynamics of open source software. What I ultimately came to were these 7 right here, if you can read that okay. These 7, and we did like a taxonomy. We went through a bunch of stuff. And these are things that we had kind of like, we just looked at a bunch of articles and interviews and other kinds of stuff to get a feel. And I will tell you this, at the end of the day, this right here, the first one, is really, at the end of the day, the only real true thing, which is the fact that you can get the code. And not just that you can get the code, that's sort of like the obvious fact. The source is open. But it's not just open. This idea that Stallman came up with that he called copyleft was the idea, and then you've got a bunch of different open source software licensing approaches, okay? And in fact, if you desire to open source your software, you can go looking, okay, for the license that suits you. There's different licenses. But the GPL was the first one, the big one, the granddaddy of them all, as they say at the Rose Bowl. Or maybe it's just the parade, I don't know. But the GPL did a handful of very, very significant things. But one of the big ones was you're free to use the software for anything you want to do with it. And the only gotcha is that the software has to take the license and the license has to go with it. Now there are variants on this, right? One says that if you use that software in your code, even if your code is proprietary, then all of your code has to be open source. That's a more of an extreme view. And there's others that, well, just this module in which it resides. Well, then in that situation, companies would hang on. Companies would just take the open source, put it in its own module, and then just interface into it. So you're only, or make changes to it, but still, it's like changes to the thing. Like for example, we're making changes to the 2810 LC3 simulator, right, which is open sourced on GitHub, and we will re-release it as open source. We don't need. There's no value to us. We'd love to flip it back out there and let people use it as well. And a lot of gratitude to the person that made the first one, made that version that we're It's really, really well written code. It's great. But but isn't that a beautiful thing, right? Otherwise, you'd be like begging. I've had situations where I've literally just like begged certain companies, can you please just do this one thing? Even small companies, with just an app, like your app is killing me, but it's amazing. But this one thing, and if I just had the code, I could have just changed it and used it. There is that thing. So, but the fact that you can get to the code with a particular kind of licensing, that's the gist from, Gospel according to Dr. K, that's the gist of open source software. Okay. Then all the other stuff is a little bit more like religious wars, or political wars, right? This one, a mythos concerning the operation and constitution of open source communities that encourage volunteer participation, a mythology concerning the origins of open source, as opposed to traditional closed source, just a licensing model that allows you to, now I want to talk about this, that allows companies to collaborate on infrastructure while differentiating themselves in higher level software. That's kind of where I started to go. It doesn't make sense. Think about this for just a second. And by the way, I'm way behind on the comments. It makes sense to have a browser and you like your browser and there's these browser features, right? And this other browser doesn't have the same features. It makes perfect sense in my view, excuse me, to compete at the level of that application that we call a browser. I have no problem or argument. It does not make sense to me to get all competitive at the level of a web server. Just think about that for a second, right? That is why, let's look this up. Let's go back to Wikipedia over here. Let's go back to Dr. Wikipedia and let's go for web server, what? Usage share? I don't know. What do we call it? Usage share of, no, that's browsers. Come on, Chuck. Shared web hosting services. I think this might have what we are looking for. Market share. Okay. Now, right. So the idea here is, and again, we're going to get into certain technologies that I'm familiar with and others that I'm not. Apache is the one we all sort of know about. I don't know how to pronounce this. Nginx? Nginx? Very close. Is that overtaking? I don't know. And real recently, I haven't played, in the space a lot. Cloudflare, Lightspeed, and then you're into the noise down here. IIS, Microsoft, etc. The point is just that a lot of companies, came to the realization some time back that if all the plumbing was the same, which we have in like municipalities have like plumbing specs, right? You go to Home Depot or wherever you buy your plumbing supplies, and there's certain standard fittings, standard threads, you don't need to compete. Our threads are 8% tighter than those other threads. Nobody cares. And then all of a sudden you get this one thing and I got to run out and get only that one threaded thing with the, whatever, with the new screw head type, etc. In other words, when you compete on infrastructure, you're kind of like, look, if everybody can hit anybody's web server because the standards are the same, this was the lesson of the World Wide Web, right? And of TCP/IP and those sort of internet protocol standards, right? The lesson of those standards was that if it's standard, everybody can talk to everybody else. That's valuable for everybody. Compete somewhere else. Don't have like, well, to talk to me, you got to use TCP/IP. But to talk to my competitor, you have to use their little magic protocol. And then everyone's got to stack 10 protocols, In the same way that in business, in international business, there tends to be languages that emerge as de facto standards, de facto meaning of the facto. No, I don't know exactly what it, literal translation from Latin, but it means essentially, I don't know, in practical sense. It's not official, right? And right now in the world, that's English. There's no question. There was a phase when it was French. There was a phase, I don't know how far back you got to go before it was Latin, right? That's why Newton wrote the Principia Mathematica in Latin, because that was the language of academia back whatever that was. So it'd be another interesting question: is the de facto language of international commerce, academia, et cetera, exchange. Today, that's English. It probably won't be forever. Going out at least, if you take it out a few hundred years, it's probably not going to be. Just because the world does what the world does. It's always changing. Okay, what am I getting at? There's no sense making everyone's going to stick to, like, if you negotiate with me, you got to talk whatever my thing is, and then everybody's got to show up for negotiations with 20 translators along with them, as opposed to the language of the conference is going to be English and everybody brings that. It's just smoother, it's cleaner, it's more efficient. And what you don't want to be doing as a company is burning time and money fighting over something that only just fragments the market. Have one web server standard. Everybody, even the competing web servers, implement that same standard. Same thing with like Java, so that your Java applets and stuff are going to run the same everywhere. Same thing with standardizing on Python version whatever. And that's why these things move through standards organization, whatever. Don't compete on infrastructure. Compete elsewhere. Build on that infrastructure. So one of the things that happens, back to Alex's paper, Alex was the lead author on this paper. What happened early in these days is that companies that needed web services to thrive would actually dedicate, like I know IBM did this and other companies did this, where they would actually dedicate bodies that are on the payroll of companies that want to compete up here but need an infrastructure here. So they would take bodies, right? Because think of it, if we let's just take some hypothetical numbers. If it's going to take us 100 engineers to build this infrastructure, and there are 10 companies competing in this market to build the thing that's going to plunk on top of it, 100, right? And if everybody builds their own, everybody burns 100 engineering years each, right? To then compete with incompatible products. And what one of the things open source did was it said, hey, what if the 10 of us who are competitors up in this entire space, what if the 10 of us said, hey, I'll throw 10 people in, you throw 10 in, you throw 10 in, we'll get our 100, we'll open source it, everybody has it, and everybody else has it too. And companies coming along behind that never even put in, they also have it. But we just saved 90% of the development cost of the infrastructure, and we guaranteed effectively that the infrastructure that we created was going to actually work and be the proper standard. Isn't that amazing? That's cool. I mean, that is a very, really awesome, rock solid, practical, proprietarily motivated, capitalistically motivated reason to collaborate with your competitors. There was a term, I believe it was actually coined by Ray Norda of Novell, which is co-opetition. It's like, look, we got competitors, but we got to compete. We got to cooperate on the stuff that we all need. This thing, let's cooperate there. Let's compete on other things, but don't compete on plumbing. Don't compete on plumbing. Compete on fixtures. Okay. There are better toilets than others. There are better faucets than others, right? Sinks and, garbage disposals and dishwashers, and compete all over the place. But the pipes are going to be the pipes. All right. Here's another one. I like this one. Another philosophy: a direct attack on the man. And the closed source, this is a little more of the Stallman, stick it to the man. This one, a marketing ploy by large corporations to engender goodwill. There's some of that. And then, like anything else you feel like, you know. So I think it's interesting. Well, apologies. Oh, it's been a late night week for me. All right. And then and that's why this paper is actually out there. And again, I know that this wasn't like whoever asked that question in the first place. Yeah, I didn't mean to be like, oh, way to hijack the whole class. This is really, really foundational and to understand. Today, I would say most open source software is available on Git. In the past, let me see something. In the past, it was like SourceForge. Let me see. Where's most open source software? The best open source software? No. What is it? Oh, repositories. Let me go repositories. I can't spell repositories, but Google will be okay. I should be using DuckDuckGo, right? Where, okay. No, very interesting. Let me see right here. I can't confirm or deny the legitimacy, right? Let me blow it up. Yeah, you know what I mean. I can't confirm or deny the accuracy here, but it's just one take on it. But still SourceForge, it's saying. And the thing about SourceForge is dedicated to open source. That's where we did almost all of our sort of data scraping, archaeological digging was actually on SourceForge. OSDN, which I have not used. FOSSHub. FOSS stands for free open source software, free/open source software. Sometimes they'll call it FLOSS, which is free Libre open source software. And then we get to GitHub, number 4. I don't know anything about F-Droid, but I'm assuming it's Android stuff. There we go. Anyway, for whatever that's worth. Isn't this cool that we can just kind of like dynamically have these conversations, pull up the information in real time when we don't have the answers in our heads? Okay, you know what? I got to back up and look. Wow, the clock's... I've been on a roll, man. Clock is moving. Okay. I'm just looking real quick at the chat just to see, and I apologize. If I've rolled over anybody in some cool threads, I apologize. Let me see. Let me see. Okay, a bunch of discussions about the browsers. Oh, and Ian, chapter and verse on that would be great. Oh, there it is down there. Thank you, Ian. First thought, I was just looking at the cases of farmers having to hack the software on their farming equipment because Deere, I used to work at John Deere. Did you know that? I was 18. I worked in the foundry. You know what the foundry at the John Deere plant in Waterloo, Iowa. I worked in the foundry doing a job called heavy chip and grind. That sounds like it's some dance moves, but it was not. It was not. Watch this, baby. I call this heavy chip and grind. It's no good. It was actually the job, heavy chip and grind. Get metal shavings in your eyes. It was beautiful. Anyway, Camille said my work was looking at a wonderful tool that would have made our lives easier, but it was open source. Oh, and would require us by the license attached to it. That's what I was talking about, right, Camille? Would require us to make our entire code. See, that to me is it's an overreach, right? Right. It's a bit of I think it's a little bit of an overzealousness to be like, maybe you should pop a chill pill there, and don't try to say if you touch our stuff, we own everything. Everybody owns everything. And that's what's interesting is, Camille, I'm trusting that you didn't use it by the sounds of it. You didn't use it because you weren't ready to open source your code base. But I do know a lot of companies that have just like pushed the code out there, and they do that in part as a kind of a comfort to their customers. Like in contrast to this John Deere thing, um, and Ian, again, thank you for dropping that link. But as a contrast to that John Deere thing, if you like it, you're like, it's all open source. If you ever needed to change it, you can. Now, the truth is, you probably don't want to, for the most part, right? You know what I mean? That's the devil's bargain there as well. Yeah. Anyway, great comments. Cool, Alex. Okay. Oh, motor vehicles, Alex, very interesting. Very, but I'll tell you that actually, Alex, so you said motor vehicles have a right to repair laws. Computers don't. I guarantee you, I will bet you a small order of teriyaki chicken wings at Nico's, which I highly recommend. That's what I will bet you, Alex, that right to repair does not extend to the software inside that car. What do you want to bet? Who wants to take on the bet? Teriyaki chicken wings on the house. But it's still an interesting point, right? It's still a really interesting thing. No bet. But yeah. Okay. Where do I want to go with this thing? Man, we're almost out of time. Has this been interesting? I feel like I've been rambling, but it's like if I had lecture slides, which I don't, this stuff's just all in my head, going back about 15 years when I started really a deep dive on the study of all this. I used to regularly attend a international conference. I'd love to get back to it. That was called OSS, which was just the International Conference on Open Source Software, academic conference, and published the thing and was you know what I mean? Just involved with the organization of the thing and on the conference committee. And uh, anyway, where do I want to go with all this? Here's a few things that I want to say. Wrapping the whole thing back up. You grew up in a world in which there was always open source software. That's a little denouement as we come back around to the beginning. You grew up in a world in which there was always open source software. I watched these characters like Stallman and you know and Linus. And by the way, if you read Raymond's article, just understand that I have some from a software engineering perspective. I just want to bookmark this. Software engineering perspective, I think Raymond did play a very critical role in some respects. Raymond, his article was somewhat influential when Netscape decided to open source, rebrand to Mozilla Firefox, and that strategic decision to open source all of that. Raymond had something to do with that, with the publication of The Cathedral and the Bazaar, which was read internally at Netscape. Others said it wasn't the big thing, but it was a thing and people had it. It is an interesting dynamic. And one of the things that I think it says is that I've seen a lot of cases, because I do copyright, trade secret, I think there really are cases where software, source code does embody trade secrets, that you don't want to disclose the code because what you disclose are the trade secrets. But I think that most of the time, much of the time, the value of the source code is like way overrated. You know what I mean? Because really, if you have the code, you still can't do anything with it until you invest all the time it takes to get a talented engineer like all y'all folks to get your head around it and build a mental model of the software. Now you can do something, and that takes investment. It's not like the code just tells you all of its secrets. It just sits there looking like code, and you still have a crap ton of work to do anything. But if you wanted to, you could. And are you really going to take that and, jump back into the mix and go, woohoo, yeah, we're off and running because we took your stuff? That can happen. That can happen. But a lot of times it's like, ooh, okay, and real quick, we're out of time. You ever inherited code in a work environment, and as you're looking at this piece of crap method or function or whatever, just been like, I'm just going to refactor this piece of crap. I'm just going to rewrite this method. It just sucks. And then after having rewritten it, right? So in other words, being handed the code that does the thing may or may not, depending, have value. But it might have value, but it might not. Just the kind of like, yeah, right, John. Yeah, you don't even know what your own code does. Right. And yeah, as Camille said, which is hard enough, even when you have access to the people who did it. And I've done this before too in my engineering career, which goes back a ways, right? You wrote this code, right? Like that, weren't you the author of this code? Yeah. This one thing, blah, 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 and have them just look at you and just go, I have no idea. I have zero recollection of any of that. Like, you made it. Yeah, and I don't walk around and keep it in my head after I leave that project for 3 years. I had something like that in the last year, actually, with one of my companies. Anyway, whew. Okay, where do we go from here? I recommend you read The Tragedy of the Commons. It really is kind of a foundational treatise on this idea of shared infrastructure. It starts with sheep farmers overgrazing, right? And it's really, I should have just made it required. It's actually really, really interesting in our entire discussion about, you know, about government and about social structures and the way we cooperate, right? You know, especially in this pandemic, the commons. The commons refers to the spaces we share and the social rules that govern how we're going to share those spaces. It relates to open source, but man, I think it really flows into all the other crap pretty solidly. Okay, we just got to stop. I got to stop. I've been on a roll, monologuing like a mad dog. I hope it's been interesting. I hope this has been enlightening at some level. You know what I mean? Pick the old man's brain a little bit. Dump to the youngsters. Dump the last 30 years of history on you in an hour. We just don't have enough time for all this crap. Anyway, all right, my friends, I got to shut it down. I got to go. You got to go. Next week, free speech. Next week, when Dr. K gets canceled. Me? No problemo. Voiceover narration, but it was all problemo. All right, my friends. All righty. I'll see you next week when we talk about free speech and set ourselves up to talk about cancel culture and all that. That's such a huge topic. All right. Out of here. Love y'all. Be successful. I'm going to get all the other crap fixed for this class. I promise you. This is my promise. And the grading, we're going to catch up. We're going to catch up. All right. I'm done. I'm out. See ya. It'll take me a minute for this to vanish, but got to stop the stream.